Say this is
Good evening, and thank you for joining us for tonight's fireside chat hosted by the National Naval Officers Association Transition Assistance Team. The Transition Assistance Team consists of veterans that offer a plethora of nonprofit, profit, government, entrepreneur, and academia employment experience. And those experiences can be shared with NNOA members, especially those facing transitions. Tonight, we have the unique opportunity to listen to Major Alex Perez, United States Marine Corps retired. And I had the pleasure of connecting with Alex back in April of 2024 through the American Corporate Partners Mentorship Program. I'll let Alex tell his story, but he joined the Marine Corps in 2004, completing the basic school at Quantico, and became a air defense control officer. He's had squadron tours, Marine Air Control Squadron 4 in Okinawa, Japan, Marine Air Control Squadron 2 in Cherry Point, as well as Systems Command and Group and Wing Headquarters tours. He's deployed to South Korea, OIF, and he's completed the Marine Corps Command and Staff College, and he's got a master's degree in organizational leadership. And so tonight we're pleased to hear from Major Alex Perez.
Hey, thank you, Donald, and thank you all for allowing me this opportunity to share a little bit about my story. Hopefully there's bits and pieces that are helpful or useful or maybe lead you into a direction that's completely opposite, and that could be helpful as well. So I won't spend too much time on my time in the military unless it comes up, but as Donald said, 20-ish years, kind of all over my community as far as the aviation command and control community. So that put me into 3 deployments, 1 OIF, 2 OEF, then a lot of CONUS or OCONUS non-combat tours. A lot of learning on the way, hard lessons, good lessons. And that is part of what led me ultimately to my transition pathway and process and decision. Not just militarily, but you'll see some family stuff there. You'll see some medical stuff there. You'll see some decisions and decision points that were part of my pathway, and then how I utilized the things that were available to me, whether it was peers, mentors, bosses, and just the things that were provided for the Marine Corps when you transition. So I'll just share a few things here, pull up this few slides to kind of keep me on track. Okay. Hopefully There you go. Okay. So again, my story, my transition pathway to the civilian workforce, what that entailed. I think coming now a year, a year and a half post retirement, uh, my transition started on day one, unbeknownst to me. You know, if you would have asked me a year ago, or 6 months ago, I probably would have said, no, my transition started towards the end of my career. Um, but reflecting and preparing for this, I think, it started from the beginning, for me. So move forward. Uh, just a few topics here. Plan to cover again my pathway to exit active duty, the transition process, civilian employment, what that how I got there and what that means now. Um, if I had some advice, what would it be? And then hopefully over to you all for any questions, comments, that you may have. So my pathway, as you can see, and this is deliberate in how it's laid out. Um, it looks like it can be compartmentalized, but it's not really. It was basically one continuous back and forth uh, movement throughout my 20 years. So just to kind of go keep it linear and hopefully keep it make it make sense to you. I'll just go from left to right here. Um, but so I came in 2004, and like I said, my transition, I believe, started in day one. So when I came in, we were hot and heavy into OAF. OEF had not fully ticked off to its full height, full complement of forces deployed. But that was a very different Marine Corps. That was a Marine Corps that was still very much tied to the 90s, which wasn't my experience. But that's what I came in, that's what I learned, and that's what I carried forward. So that language, the demeanor, and then you throw in your deployments. And for those of us who had deployments, everybody, good, bad, or indifferent, it leaves could be a bad taste, could be some lessons learned, could be some great things, could be some scars, physical or otherwise. Um, and so, what does that mean? So failure. So, one of my biggest challenges in the Corps came past the midway point of my career, where I had three combat deployments under my belt. I had seen what that does to people, what's required, whether it's just the work, the time, the stress, um, how to prepare, how not to prepare. More importantly, I think that's one of my biggest things of seeing folks that weren't prepared, seeing my Marines or other Marines around me that hadn't prepared themselves mentally. Their families weren't prepared. They weren't prepared for combat and whatever that entailed. So, what does that mean, right? So, out of touch, circa 2017. So, around 2017, my boss tells me, "Hey, I'd like you to go be a detachment OIC for a MEU." And I said, I never really thought about that. I thought, hey, I'm going to do the normal path. I'm going to be OPSO, XO, CO, and go that way. And that's where I believed I was headed, based on what my bosses told me and what my fit reps said. And I said, you know what, this could be different. I took some advice, and they said, give me a few details, and so that's what I did. So I had a detachment as part of the MEU, which is very non-standard for my community. Um, it is you have to meet a lot of wickets to just be chosen. So it was a great honor for me, and given I was very full of myself, very overconfident because I got picked, and I was one of one to go do this job. But I also had a lot of baggage that I wasn't tracking. Um, and this is where things kind of jump around because, there were medical things, there were family things that were going on that I didn't have time to process it. I'm a Marine. That's not important. I got the mission. I got my Marines. That's number one. Put all those things into a compartment and set them aside so I can focus on what I got to do. Anyways, long story short, um, because of my experiences and because of where I was at and, my emotional intelligence, my decision making, it led to some very choice language to the wrong people. Um, and that didn't go over well. It ends up on a survey, and you put your boss or your bosses in a position, well, what am I going to do here? Needless to say, it didn't work out well for me, right? So I was told, hey, we can't have you here. There's an ongoing investigation. Your comments need to be evaluated. So between a few of my bosses, they said, okay, we'll just bring them back. Um, Kind of pretend like this didn't happen, but that you're gonna have to be accountable for it. And I was. I was accountable for my mistakes, my choices on my fit rep. Um, so it wasn't a great fit rep, and it was definitely not going to help because I was on a board, and by all means, I was expected to get promoted. Meanwhile, as I'm jumping around, my family, this is all kind of happened at the same time. I was in already at this point, a 3-year custody battle for my oldest daughter. So that was a significant financial challenge for me. And it's one of those things, when you're read into a lot of different things and you have different security clearances. One of the questions they always ask you, do you have financial problems? So constantly weighing on my head. It's like, I just got to take care of this. I got to make sure nothing comes up because it's going to jeopardize my career. Again, focusing on my career as opposed to the things that are going on around me. Um, Concurrently, I have a relationship with my youngest daughter's mom, and that ends. She takes my youngest daughter and they move to the opposite coast. So now I'm fresh off, my first experience of failure. I'm in this custody battle, having financial issues, I'm having legal issues. Oh, by the way, I have a bunch of medical issues that, of course, I don't go to medical. I don't tell anybody about because I gotta make sure I still pass my PFT, my CFT. I still look good in uniform. I'm still, the ideal Marine, and I'm not complaining and I don't want that to get on my medical record. And then there's the acceptance and redemptions here that's going on. Um, you start kind of having to look in the mirror. It's like, okay, hey, I put myself in this position, and making that acceptance. I'm well past my midway point. What does that mean? Can I get to retirement? Can I get to a promotion? And then I started asking myself, well, do I want any of that stuff? So some mentors, some bosses, they say, hey, listen, this is what you got to do, Alex. You want to get promoted? You're not a problem. You're not going to have a problem. But here's, do X, Y, and Z. Um, and all this stuff's going on, still doing the full job, still trying to balance kid on the opposite coast, still trying to balance a kid that I don't see that's in the same city as me, legal bills and responsibilities, and then really my medical stuff really started to catch up to me. You got a lot of back issues that, you know, no offense to any of our Navy medical brethren here, but they weren't doing me any justice. So I had to go out in town, and that was a battle in itself to actually get proper diagnosis because I had a boss that told me, regardless of what happens with your career, if you don't get your medical stuff documented, you're going to regret it in your retirement. Didn't really know what that meant, but I trusted him, and that's what I started to do, and I started to fight for what I rate and what's provided to me. And then, not just a back, but I had a doctor said, hey, you need a hip replacement. I was 41, and yeah, your hip shot. It's got to get replaced. So all this stuff's going on, kind of coming to the realization, okay, well, what do I want to do? Well, I came to a realization that, hey, the military is going to go on without me. They don't need me. Can I be comfortable with not needing the military? And what does that mean for me? And that's really when I started to realize I need to start thinking about what comes next. And then you know what? I think promotion sounds great. I got these bosses and I got colonels and generals that are willing to vouch for me, but I don't know if I really care about that as much because I want my kids back. I want to get through this legal status. I want to figure out, get a straight story about, do I need to be, you know, wheelchair ridden because of what's going on in my back and my hips, and how do I get a straight story? So that really led me to, okay, hey, keep doing a good job, but I need to refocus my priorities. And me personally, part of this and part of this struggle kind of led me to being saved as a Christian. So, this is my own story, my own thing. And that brought me into a path where it really helped me realize the Marine Corps is not everything. You can be okay without the Marine Corps, but what do I do now? So that's what I did. I had to, in order to chase those priorities, I had to accept some billets that kept me local in San Diego, which is where I was at the time, of things that I'd already done before, things that were not in my MOS and really didn't help you on promotion boards. So I took a job as, one of the Marine Corps West installations. It's a B billet. And, I think the equivalent of Navy is kind of shore duty. But some of those billets, they don't read well for promotion. They don't necessarily make it competitive. Um, and people say that's not a thing. It's all about how you perform. Well, my personal opinion, not always true. You can be a high performer, but if your billet wasn't as taxing as somebody in the fleet, it all comes down to who's reading those things in personal interpretation. So that was one decision. And then I had to make another decision, career or family again. And because the monitor told me, said, hey, I cannot keep you in California anymore. I understand that you have a lot of legal things going on, and you've put in your proper paperwork with us. At the time, this is right about the time when I found out that my oldest daughter was being abused. So that really led me to the Marine Corps is not my priority. So long story short there, I got another job that was not sexy, it was not cool, it was not going to help me get on a promotion board. But I had to go to 29 Palms in in the desert. And if you've never been there, it is, nobody wants to go, nobody wants to stay there, but that's what I had to do. So I did. Along this process, all of these things, failure, family, redemption, medical acceptance, they're all constantly going back and forth. At this time when I get to 29 Palms, my physical health was really deteriorating. And I was fortunate enough to find someone in the Navy system that could actually help me so I can stay in uniform and reach that threshold where, hey, I was grandfathered into retirement. So by choosing, another billet that was not ideal for a Marine Corps progression path, it helped me find a little bit of medical healing, but it also helped me keep me closer to my family and keep me aligned to what my goals were, hey, faith, family, Marine Corps. And, those were conversations that, and I tell bosses that, like, that's not going to get you promoted. Where are your priorities? And just kind of have to shake my head and learn my lessons from not saying the things that I know I shouldn't to people that I shouldn't say them to, and just kind of I sir, I ma'am, good to go, and carry forward. So that was a bit of that pathway which formalized my decision of what I needed to do and how I needed to transition. Um, so then, here we have, I'm sorry. Um, just a little bit of okay, what was the transition process, and what was some of the notable medical things that I had to learn. I was fortunate enough that last tour in 29 Palms, I had an old boss who I'd worked for multiple times, and I reached out to him. I was like, hey, can you bring me back to San Diego? He said, absolutely, give me a week and I'll talk to the monitor and I'll get you back. And, I told him the whole story. He'd known me since I was a young lieutenant. I'd worked for them multiple times. And he said, listen, you're going to come back. You're going to work for me directly. You're going to focus on your medical and your legal stuff, and don't worry about anything else. Just you work for me, do the jobs, the tasks I give you, and then go from there, which was a little strange because I got put into a regiment uh, group operations shop, which I had already had every job in that shop. Um, but I didn't report to any of them. I worked directly for their boss. Um, but that was great because it allowed me to, once again, stars were shining, or, faith was in my favor. That put me to one of the better transition offices in the Marine Corps at Miramar. And I started that process looking into, okay, what does transition mean? Probably about a year and a half, a little bit out in between 2 years and a year and a half. Um, and I had talked to a lot of folks, and then I basically all the folks that I talked to did it the wrong way. They started late. They didn't take it serious. Um, they skipped it altogether, or they were scrambling, 2 weeks to their end of active service, trying to get everything done. And I was like, I am not going to do that. So I started early. Um, and, I was close to in between 2 years and a year and a half when I started the process. So I signed up for the classes, and I asked, how many times can I take the class? They said, as many as you want. I say, okay, great. I'm going to do it at least 2 times. Well, what you usually find is we all think we're too important, right? The job can't go on without us. We can't miss, 3 days. What's going to happen to what are our bosses going to think? What's going to happen to the folks we're competing with? That's a real thing. Um, Unfortunately, I was in a position where I didn't necessarily really have to worry about that stuff because I worked for one person. So again, I was very fortunate. We all can believe we're too busy, but the reality is when you leave the Army, Navy, Marine Corps, Air Force, Space Force, Coast Guard, they keep going without you. You're a, not to be harsh about it, but you're a forgotten memory, and they just keep moving. Somebody will do that job. Somebody will pick up the slack. That's how we are. Um, and it put me in a great position to really start figuring out, okay, what is my future going to look like? What are they providing me to try to understand how do I make the next step? What's going to be best for my future? So, foot stomper here, you can see it's in bold. Um, think about, hey, when is the right no later than time to start this process? You're not too busy, even though it feels like it, especially if you're already considering your future, and you're close to, whether it's 20 years or, you, for whatever reason, got to hit 25, or you want to go to 30 or beyond. Really try to evaluate what does busy mean, when you're thinking about your future. And the greatest thing, and I would tell anybody when I was in uniform, and I tell all my buddies that are still active, it's your future. What does that mean? What does that matter? How much time do you want to put towards planning for your future? Um, Medical, I think this is one of the biggest things, and it'll be one of my advice foot stompers is, if you didn't document it, it doesn't exist. And it is a battle with the VA to try to claim these things, especially once you exceed your year threshold post-retirement. It is much harder to try to get the VA to accept anything. Not to mention, hopefully you kept a record, but if you didn't, good luck trying to track down, when you got seen for that one knee injury that you didn't make a big deal of, and it wasn't fully documented, or a foot problem or a back problem or whatever the case may be, or mental health. That's one of a lot of things my buddies missed out on, my peers, is, you know, embarrassing, ashamed to admit to, mental health issues from, deployments or just regular service. Um, and in my opinion, I think that's one of the most underclaimed, underdocumented things because of the stigma that goes along with it when you're still wearing the uniform. Um, Again, you're not too busy. You can get to medical, figure it out, plan accordingly like we've been taught, schedule your day, schedule your time, figure out what you got to do, and just get it documented. Um, there's a direct correlation to what's documented and your compensation for disability that you earned in service of your country. So then what does that mean now? So civilian employment. So here I am. I'm at 19 years and I realize, oh shoot, I got to get a hip replacement. How am I going to do this? Can I do that? I'm worried, the Marine Corps is going to medically, retire me or do something crazy and just kick me out. So I had a lot of conversations with surgeons and legal and, our admin department to figure out how to do this. Um, I knew I was going to retire. I knew I wanted to get this surgery while I was still in the military, because I didn't want to have any fights with the VA or trying to get surgical care or all the care that I needed to include the 6 month recovery, all the medicine, all the physical therapy. So I wanted to, enjoy and it is a privilege when you're in active duty. All of this stuff is free. All your medical care, all your prescriptions, all your physical therapy. It's literally you just have to take the time to do it. Once you leave the military, it's a different story. So I had knew this. I had talked to folks that had done it both ways, had surgery before retirement, had surgery afterwards. So I calculated that into my exit plan. And then I said, okay, well, they also provide things like SkillBridge. Um, if for those folks that aren't familiar with SkillBridge, and forgive me, I'm not too up to speed on it. I don't know if it still exists or if it, how much is offered, but it's basically a program, a DoD approved program, or at least it was, that allows you to go to school or start a trade or learn a trade or get exposure to a community outside of the Marine Corps to prepare you for whatever that industry was. For me, um, I said, well, I'm not really sure what I want, but the skills that I have, um, I know they relate to the defense acquisition community. I know they relate to defense contracting. Um, I know I kind of want to get into some kind of business, but not sure yet. So let me just try to prep myself, even if that's not the right choice. And one of the best pieces of advice that I heard over and over from veterans is don't worry about what your first job is outside of the military because it's likely not going to be your last job as you figure out what you want to do post retirement. But do everything to prepare yourself to have a job post retirement. So I had to think about that, and I was like, okay, well, let me just prepare myself, even though I don't know what I want to do. So it was a program that allowed me to study for and get a PMP certification for project management. So I brought this plan together to my boss and had to go up through the chain of command all the way up to the CG of, this Marine's going to get a surgery, be out of action for 3 months. Then he wants to do this skill bridge program, which is another month or so. Then he wants to take all his leave. And I knew enough at that time that I said, you know what, I'm going to get a lot of questions on why I'm going to be gone for the last 6 months of my Marine Corps career, not doing anything related to the military. So I went to our lead admin shop, which I pack for us at the command level, talked to, and another hard lesson learned, found the senior chief warrant officer who knew all the rules, went over my plan, and he said, absolutely, sir, you can do this. Here's the regulations that afford you to. Make sure you have this because all your bosses are going to question you. Um, and that's what I did. And when I showed him, all the Marine Corps orders and the documentation, got approved, and that's what led me. And then, okay, so I have surgery. Now I'm doing, this PMP program, and I'm trying to figure out, okay, now what? What do I do? They gave me all these skills, they gave me all these resources. Still don't really know what to do. How do I write a resume? It definitely, how do I, what is networking? What does that mean on the civilian side? a mentor. Like, well, I've always just had one of those. Like, how am I supposed to find one now? So I use those tools that they provided me in my transition program, and I had done it twice. I'd done the program twice, so I actually learned some of it, and I kept a lot of notes. And that's actually how I found Donald, through the ACP program, and he helped mentor me through a lot of this process. Um, and I had resources that helped me write an actual civilian resume, take hundreds of fitness reports and turn it into something that an actual person that knows nothing about the military that can read and make sense of. Um, I figured out what networking was. Some of that was trial and error, just going to events, and then people pulling me aside. It was like, hey, don't do that. This is how you network. This is what you should be looking for. You know, this is how to project your value in your resume. And I was like, well, value? What do you mean? I've never had to do that before. My records always spoke to my value or my reputation. But what is your value? What is your value in the civilian workforce? How does that translate to a salary? How does that translate into compensation? Um, so those are all things that I had been given the tools on how to do those things. So I just had to apply them. And if not, I knew the resources. I could go look them up, go find them, or go ask somebody. So I took advantage of that stuff. And multiple resumes went out. I got a couple offers. One was a low ball offer, which kind of rubbed me the wrong way. So we went back and forth. And meanwhile, I got another offer at the Pentagon, and very quickly realized that wasn't going to be for me, even though it was a great salary and it was interesting work. Um, but the money didn't sell me. The interesting work didn't sell me. What sold me to not take that offer was the environment of that office, the people that I would have to work for. And, that was never something in the military that was a thing. You got orders, you got assigned to do a job. It didn't matter if you liked them or not. Your pay didn't matter because, that was already caged. Everybody knew what you were making. Um, wasn't a question. And then just kept at it. um, and ultimately, by building out my LinkedIn profile, that's how I found the job that I'm currently in. So, been in this job now a year and a half. I literally got a phone call. Hey, saw your profile, recruiter so and so. Your profile and your career speaks specifically to someone that we're looking for. That week, I had an offer. The next week, I accepted it, and this was in June. So now my retirement was July. My end of active service was July 1st, 2024. This opportunity came in June. So I had two offers previously. Um, Actually, it was three offers previously that I had turned down, which my wife was not excited about that. She did not like that. It led to a lot of stress in the household. We still had two kids that we were taking care of, and all the things that go with it, a mortgage, a house, all the stuff. Um, and so those are some things you have to factor. And fortunately, some of the things that I learned helped me be comfortable with saying no, thank you, but no, thank you, and keep looking and keep waiting. And I was fortunate that this opportunity was provided to me. It was a great offer. It was great people. What sold me on the job was the people that I'd be working with. That's honestly what sold me. And here I am a year and a half later. So fast rewind to a year. I'm thinking, okay, well, I probably should be looking at some kind of evaluation. So I dig back into that Marine Corps skill set of, how do I prepare my annual fitness report for my boss and tell him all the things, my brag sheet, the things that I've done. And my boss says, oh, no, Alex, we're a real small defense contracting company. We don't do any of that stuff. The way, and literally we are small. We're under 20 people. And my section is only, there's now four of us. So when I say small, real small, he says we do bonuses. And he says, I know you may be concerned because your bonuses will get taxed. So that's something to think about, and I didn't think about it up to that point of what does compensation look like for the job you're chasing? Are there annual opportunities for evaluation where you can get a raise or a promotion? Are they so small that they try to do it via bonuses, which those get taxed, right? A little bit more, um, especially depending how big they are. And he said, well, hey, I've never had somebody send me this kind of stuff. And I gave him a whole template on why I think I deserved a raise. And he's like, let me think about this. We hung up. He called me with probably 20 minutes later. He's like, hey, you know what? I'm going to change how the company does our reevaluations, and we're going to implement your template for everybody else coming after you. I was like, great. But what about, my raise, boss? He's like, oh yeah, yeah, I don't think that'll be a problem, but I got to talk to the president. I was like, okay, great. So again, I went back to my tool bag of figuring out what my value was. For my job, my community, did some AI searching, did some internet searching, used some resources to figure out, okay, what's a normal compensation for a raise? What's my cost of living in my area? Um, Put that all together, put a justification for it, updated that, sent it to the boss. He forwarded it to the president about 2 weeks later. President called me and says, hey, gonna get it to you. I don't know how. I got to move some stuff around, but I'm gonna give you what you asked for. Like, great. Um, and so here I am now, 6 months post that. Um, Almost 6 months, I guess. And that brings me to kind of my last slide here. If I had to kind of boil this down into some main advice points, what would it be? Start early. Even if you don't know exactly when your end of active service date is going to be, you got to start thinking about that. We join, that's the last thing you're thinking about. Maybe some people know, hey, I'm only going to do 4 years or 5 years or 10 years and I'm out. But once you hit kind of one of those milestones, that the middle of your career or the middle point where you can formally retire with all your benefits, start thinking about it. Don't wait till the last year. Don't wait till you have 6 months left. Don't wait till you have 2 months left and you have no plan. Um, the military taught us a lot, um, but it doesn't necessarily teach you everything you'll need for civilian life. And somebody told me this, but then they said, well, it's also going to have a lot of application in your civilian life. And I kind of thought like, well, you're kind of talking out of both sides of your mouth. Which one is it? But it's true, there's a lot of things that necessarily don't translate, our culture. Some of our culture just doesn't translate to different civilian workplaces, depending on what kind of culture you come from in the military. Um, but a lot of the skills that you didn't even realize you learned and picked up along the way, your schools, are kind of focused on accomplishing tasks, being able to be focused, take on a lot, and apply it in a meaningful and an efficient manner. Like those are skill sets that I've seen have translated hugely in my civilian career. Um, Document, document, document. If you didn't document it, it doesn't exist. And if it's not a clear documentation, just says, hey, seen for foot pain, that's great. You can actually use that. And some of these transition courses will tell you, when the VA person comes in, and hopefully they do come in your transition training, ask them these questions. Well, hey, what if I just got some kind of vague, nebulous, diagnosis or note from a doctor? Or what if I can't even read it? And I guess I'm dating myself a little bit because some of my stuff is still handwritten. A lot of it's all electronic now. But when you do get those handwritten notes, or if you get seen in a foreign country, um, you have to put in the work to get that stuff translated and read by somebody else. Otherwise, again, it never happened. And then, my story is my story, but you got to figure out what's best for you, what's best for your family, maybe you don't have a family, maybe it's a financial thing, maybe it's what you want your future to be, maybe it's a financial thing or educational thing, or maybe it's all of those and more. But you have to come to a point to figure out what are your priorities once you start thinking about your transition. And you've accepted that, hey, you know what, I'm going to transition, or you know what, I'm about 75% there. Let me not wait and do it late and try to get a jump start on this. And then at least I'm prepared when I finally pull the trigger. And that's it. So I'll just open it up for any questions or comments or whatever anybody may have.
Awesome. So Alex, thank you for sharing that very personal tale of your journey. A standard question is, what advice would you give to your younger self, knowing that you're here and what you did to get here? But before you answer that, I do know when we started our mentorship with ACP or through ACP, you had talked before about having a mentor, and that didn't work out. And so I just want to, for the group, talk a little bit about how this relationship isn't one way. It's active, and to the extent that it's not working out for you, make it work out for you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Donald. I'll start with your first question about, knowing what I know now, what advice, would I give to my younger self, my former self? Start thinking about it early. I came into the Marine Corps and I didn't want to retire. I grew up as a Marine kid. My stepdad had retired from the Marine Corps. I did not want to do that. I wanted to, be a company commander. I wanted to go to combat, lead my company, and then that was it. Jump out, bail, get education, move on with my life. So I did that. And then I realized, well, I'm not ready to leave yet. I'm having fun. And so I kept going. But start early, as you start figuring out your finances, figure out, what does this mean? Even if you don't know when you want to get out, just start thinking about it, being familiar with it. Talk to people that are doing it, or have done it. Another thing I would tell myself, I would say, don't turn down opportunities. Uh, I was in a billet where it was an acquisitions billet, and I told my boss, hey, this is cool, but I never want to take up this specialty. Hindsight, that came back to burn me when I went back to the same guy and say, hey, what if you willing to sign off on this stuff for me? I'll take up an acquisitions billet. And I had burned not the personal relationship or the work relationship, but I had told him, like, yeah, I never want to do this stuff. I want to keep doing cool stuff in the fleet. But here I am, I'm doing exactly what I said, contracting work. And it's hard to just think about that stuff when you're young, but or wherever you may be, potentially it could be hard for a variety of reasons, but keep your options open. And honestly, knowing what I know now, I probably would have started a little sooner. There is a period where you can't start a lot of the formal processes, at least in the Marine Corps. But I would paid attention a little bit more to some of those things, especially when talking to my Marines or Marines that were with me, being able to advise them a little bit more, being more in tune to those things, like, I don't have time to worry about those kind of stuff. That's not me. It's not, I got to focus on the job, a mission, like the important stuff, taking care of my Marines. And then, your second question there, Donald. So the mentorship piece, it started out, and I was like, what do I have to lose? And it's free. just I got to sign up and talk to somebody, and talk to somebody that has been there, done that, um, in a process where I'm trying to go. I knew I was going. I knew I was getting out. I knew I was retiring. I needed to get a job in the civilian workforce. Um, so I got paired. What the program that I went through, ACP, they paired me up with somebody, and great plethora of wealth, but it wasn't the right match. And the way the program says, hey, you don't have to stick with this person. And I was like, hey, I'd like to have somebody that's a little more closer to my experiences from in the Marine Corps and closer to where I live, as opposed to, someone that was all the way on the other side of the world in Europe. Um, and that's what happened. And Donald and I got paired up, and it's been great. And, someone again had been there, done that, um, career in the military, transitioned, doing great things in the civilian workforce with the military and a rear view mirror. So having things to bounce off of, like, resumes and jobs and, offers that you get or financial questions. Um, what do I do as a disabled veteran? Do I rate anything? How do I go about that? Tax exemptions, property tax, real estate, tax exemptions, the VA. How do you manage some of those things? When I got out, my initial disability was 80%. Um, and had to go back and resubmit some stuff, but it was all within the same year, so it was a little easier. Um, and then my rating changed. It went up. So just having a person to bounce that off of that you could talk to and what you're comfortable with. For me, I was fresh out of the military, but the language I knew was still military. And Donald, he knew that stuff because he's been there, done that, and I could speak to him plainly, and he'd give me feedback.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Uh,
This is
so
Captain
I
Francis, if
want
I could ask a question.
yes, sir, please.
Uh, yeah, Alex, you mentioned the use of LinkedIn and how that helped with this, I guess your current job. Is there anything unique that is worth passing on to other viewers of this video that, anything you learned there and recommendations?
Yeah, I had a buddy of mine. I've never been in the military. Couldn't be the furthest from it. Um, and he essentially got a corporate job as an executive doing recruiting. And the one thing he told me is like, most jobs are done via online means, and LinkedIn is one of the biggest means to get a job nowadays. If your LinkedIn profile isn't good, you're not helping yourself get a job. And more importantly, you're not helping yourself get the job that you want to get. Um, and I had heard that. I was like, you know what? I had heard that before. And I heard that multiple times in my transition classes that I went to. Build in your LinkedIn. You get a year free as a veteran, to a premium account. And then after that, pay for it. It's worth it. And that's what I've done. And it worked out. It has worked out very well for me.
Alex, your story is compelling, and I don't think we've ever had a fireside chat it come anywhere close to everything that you had to endure from not just the process of transitioning, but the process of getting medical surgeries happen during the process of transitioning. And so one of the takeaways I have is that the value of the relationships that you built while you were in these former bosses who would allow you to come and work for them and not just do their work but also do your transitioning and your medical stuff at the same time. I think that we've had several speakers talk to the value of course, and this is a term from days gone by, but utilizing their Rolodex or their contact list of former bosses, former colleagues, former shipmates, and the value that played in what you were able to accomplish. Could you further expound on just how valuable it was to have had strong, positive relationships that you had built while you were active duty that uh, assisted in your transition process?
Absolutely. And thank you for that question. When I came in to the Marine Corps, um, I would say relationships mattered, but I took for granted how much they mattered. Um, the being, not being a jerk, being a good person. Who cares? I'm a Marine. I got to do the job. Like, I'm not here for your feelings. Well, as I kind of said it, that ultimately came back to bite me, and I learned that lesson, and I learned it the hard way. But hey, you got to learn and move forward, and I think that's what I did. And I've been able to carry that forward now. Um, but there's still those relationships that you garner along the way, especially after you learn a hard lesson like that. You realize, okay, relationships do matter. They matter a lot. Who that is a thing, and I've learned that's a thing in the military. That's a thing in the civilian workforce. Um, and you may not have saw that person or talked to them for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, but what they're going to remember is, Alex was a good dude. He did good work for me. Yeah, I'll hook him up. I'll help him out. Um, and I was blessed. Again, I go back to, you know, I was very fortunate because I know plenty of folks that um, didn't have those opportunities or didn't have my same circumstances either. Um, but it worked out because I had some significant relationships that carried over throughout my career and ultimately ended up helping me because I could have been in a very bad situation trying to get to retirement and take care of medical and family and all the things of life coming to head simultaneously. So they matter. Relationships matter. How you treat people matters. In and out of the uniform, um, and how you carry forward with those relationships.
Yeah, and so the thing I emphasize there as well is not just the fact that you had those good, strong, positive relationships, but that you maintain some kind of a contact with them, even though it could have been 5, 7, 10 years in the past. That if you don't keep good contact on, unfortunately, we have Facebook and LinkedIn and some of those kind of online documents that we didn't have in the past, to where if you didn't keep a phone number or at least an email address or whatever on those individuals and you lose them, they're gone. That's just a matter of fact. And I've had some of my junior officers that were under my command from back in the day, find me on Facebook or find me on LinkedIn and a positive endorsement on something. Boy, that goes a long way, because unfortunately what happens in some cases is people try to get these senior members, endorse something, or these senior people because of what position they're in. But I think hiring officials are smart enough to know the difference between someone who was an acquaintance and someone who is a close friend that kept contact with you over these
Yes.
period of time. That makes a huge difference,
Mhm.
even to me, to where when I've written a letter of appreciation or a letter endorsement, I made sure the verbiage was such that I had a close personal relationship with this individual, not somebody who knew me from having seen me at a conference, or, we happen to be in the same air wing or something. It's a whole lot different when you have that close one-on-one individual contact where I can speak specifically to your character and to the quality of your work. That's huge.
So you mentioned the transition assistance program, you mentioned SkillBridge, you mentioned ACP. What other resources did you utilize that helped you out in the transition process?
Oh man, there's a ton. I mean, we wouldn't. I don't think there's enough time, and I don't honestly don't remember all of them because when I went through my transition assistance classes, there's a litany. I mean, literally, you get lists of websites, you get books, you get ton of information, and they kind of talk to you about what the resources are and how they can be useful. Um, and I go back to don't take that stuff for granted. Don't take your transition classes that you have to go through, you know, for granted. They matter. It's only your future, right? So um, keep those things, or at least know how to get back to the sources or the office that you went to. Um, I I had my surgery 6 months out from retirement. Shortly thereafter, uh, I moved to Virginia before my doctor said it was okay. Um, but I still would send emails and call the resource office at Miramar. Hey, what was that one thing that you told me about? I can't find it. What was that thing about figuring out my value with the Department of Labor? The website that told me, what my interests are, or the VA, that was a big one. Asking questions about the VA and how to follow it up and that kind of stuff. So there's tons of them. Use them.
Awesome. Well, so does Hewlin, do you have any questions? Or anyone else?
As you were talking, I was having a lot of flashbacks about my own career, and I like to foot stomp the relationships matter because I in the civil engineer corps, which is we had a document called the P1, which is a directory of all of our civil engineer corps officers and where they were stationed. And I kept all of my P1s throughout my whole career. Okay. And I used that to help me determine whether I was going to, put in for a different job and that kind of stuff. But I also realized toward the end of my career, there were a lot of people that I talked to, a lot of people I worked with, and and a lot of people that knew me personally that came in handy when it came time to get a reference. So I really appreciate what you were saying about that. And I spent just over 10 years working for a VA, and I was amazed at the number of veterans who chose not to attend the transition assistance program. And so I was glad to hear you took advantage of that. But that was something that I also find myself doing, helping a lot of veterans outside of my normal job, helping them with their transition, and also getting their claim, processed. So again, I thank you for that. Um, um, what you had to say about that. So
Hewlin, I didn't, what you just said, that there was a document in the civil engineering corps.
yeah.
I thought that the supply corps officers were the only ones who had that because I had
Oh,
personal knowledge of and have seen the supply corps officers
mhm,
document that's very similar to what you're talking about.
yeah.
That when you get ready to PCS,
Hmm.
do a job, you can go in that book and that guy's rotation
Yeah.
date and when. So you
Yeah.
can basically fish for your own job,
Yes.
your next
Yeah.
future job, knowing that that's a job that you might be interested in. And
Yes.
so that is a very well-kept secret in those communities that it doesn't exist for aviation, doesn't exist for SWOs. And
Mm,
so, yeah, I don't know any other corps except
okay.
yours and the supply corps that have that.
Mm, okay.
All
Mm.
right, so it's on the top of the hour, and Alex, I want to thank you both personally and professionally for joining us tonight and give you the last word before we sign off.
Gentlemen, I appreciate it. You know, when Donald put this to me, you know, I was like, me? You sure about that?
Hmm.
You know, what do I have to offer? But it's just one person's experience. Take it for what it may. It was my personal path. Hopefully there's something helpful in there. If not, you know what not to do. So I appreciate it and thank you all and good luck to all those veterans that are doing their transition.
Well, we're entertained by the fact that you call him Donald because we always call him Biscuit. By his,
Trying
by
to,
his
trying
call
to keep it a
sign,
little more formal.
he took Biscuit off his name today because he knew that he was in a more formal state. So we're going to start calling Donald too, for that matter. Now,
All right. Well, thank you everyone joined us tonight. Our next and final for 25. The final chat, fireside chat will be on Tuesday, 2 December. So Alex, you're welcome to join us as well. But I'm gonna go get some food. Everybody, good night. Make sure you tip your waitresses.
Alex, excellent presentation. Absolutely excellent. Thank you.
appreciate you.
Thanks, guys.
Night, guys.
Good night.
Good night. All right.